we looked at how it could be weaponized. And we then went into number 10, demonstrated what we'd built, how it could be weaponized. And the words to say is terrifying. And that before the Bletchley Park Summit changed the whole emphasis of that, which was all around, well, AGI's years away, so we don't have to worry. And we show the idea of collective intelligence, distributed intelligence, lots of different agents collaboratively working together.
The flow of finance for cloud infrastructure is going out of Europe. Global analysis is that between now and 2030, generative AI specifically, and obviously machine learning and all the traditional predictive analytics that are under now the AI banner, are going to generate equivalent financial global impact to the whole economy of China, something 12, $13 trillion.
Yes.
So if we're in a situation where 80% of the AI systems are wholly owned in North America, I think 15% in Asia, and I think Europe is like 4%. Sovereignty and the importance of capturing the value of that within the geographic domain to benefit the very people who are leveraging it, seems like a very sensible way forward.
You have to have 100% trust in it. And at the moment, most organizations don't trust AI. And it's not about hallucinations. It's actually, this is, our data's, these critical decisions we're asking for advice on, it's going outside our environment onto servers. We don't know where they are. We don't know if it's been trained on, who's training on that data, who's looking at that data. So as AI becomes more and more useful, the trust level becomes critical, because if it now knows all your M&A strategy, so which companies what you're interested in buying, that's massively price sensitive. If you can't lock down that knowledge and keep it completely inside, air-gapped within your environment, you're at risk, massive, massive risk.
Baseline.
The baseline is designed to create an emotional response.
I've seen things you won't believe.
More human than human.
Make you question everything.
So everything you're doing, the way you're building architecture and everything has to be there to take advantage of the technology. So if you've built a stack which has been super opinionated, you're in real trouble. Mm-hmm. And that technical debt, you're not going to get rid of it soon. And we see it all the time. People making really bad calls. And we see companies, large organizations making really adding technical debt in with AI. So they think, right, we need to build fine-tuned models that understand our organization. And they spend millions creating these fine-tuned models, going getting data, and again, it's just completely the wrong approach. We see it all time and time and again. And I think the technical debt is becoming like an AI debt. People are taking an approach which will not scale. Like a fine-tuned model, you can't permission it. You can't get it to forget information that you've already given it. You have to spend ages creating the data, cleaning the data, putting it through, retraining the model. Whatever new better model comes out tomorrow, you can't just swap it over. It costs you another $5 million in compute time to retrain the model. Really, really bad decisions being made by large organizations. But they think they're being smart. They think, oh yeah, it's our model. And it's not. The world is moving too fast for that. So yeah, so it is, technical debt is a huge, huge issue. And AI debt, people taking the wrong architectural approach.
Tell me, somebody asked me a question the other day when I told them I was meeting you, and they said, do Whitespace offer a migration path to their products? The person I was speaking to is influential in the deployment of these, specifically AI models for frontline workers. And I think the point was they were aware that the social dynamics and increasing importance of sovereignty and to the point we discussed earlier, population sentiment and how they feel about these AI technologies becoming part of governance, healthcare, etc., there was a feeling that do Whitespace as a sovereign company offer migration routes from other platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've gone out and partnered with OpenAI and to build out some kind of capability or a GPT or whatever, absolutely we can take the core capabilities they've done and deploy it onto Collective in a very, very fast time, and remove the dependence on OpenAI or a US sovereign capability. So we can bring it into a UK sovereign capability and make it agnostic as well. So you can swap it out for, you could keep it using, a GPT-4o model if you want to. But if you then want to be able to swap it out for Gemini Pro or for a Llama 3 model or for an open source model, we can do that as well. So that ability to do it really, really quick, totally agnostic, keep your data where you want it, whether that's on-prem, air-gapped, absolutely, that's a critical part of it. I mean, one of the parts that we spend a lot of time with government, especially, is around data, and I think and we see this a lot where large organisations have been convinced by typically large consulting firms. I used to work with Deloitte, work for Deloitte, sorry. They get convinced that they need to clean up all their data, and they need to move to this idea of data-driven decision-making, and that data is like oil, super valuable in its own right. And it is so fundamentally flawed. And it leads to so many bad decisions. And I think what they've been sold on is this idea that if you can just clean up all your data, we can then throw AI at it and we can predict the future. And it's nonsense. I come from an economic modelling background. The world is far too complex to predict the future. And if you go with a data-centric approach, you are going to come a cropper. Now, one of the very few good things that happened from COVID, it was a great example that we could say to customers and people we talk to, a great example of how that approach is just fundamentally flawed. So if you've got AI that's using that kind of, is taking the past and extrapolating it into the future, and that's, saying this is what's going to happen to your market or your competitor, whatever it might be. And then COVID hit, everything changed overnight. Shops were shut. You couldn't go out. All your data was redundant that you had. And at that point, AI, that you just bet your whole business on and all your decision making on, would turn around and was going, effectively saying, I know I need 6 months of new data before I can give you any answer. So, we call it fair weather friend in that situation. It was like, if you've gone for a data-centric approach, you've got a fair weather friend in AI. The moment you need it most, he goes, nah, I need more data, please. 6 months at least of new data. And then I'll give you an idea how to get through lockdown and save your business. If you built your business on that, you are absolutely, in trouble. So the way we describe it with our clients is you have to go, you have to be decision driven. So it's decision driven, but informed by data. And what that basically means is that the way we describe data is it's more like water. With water, if you have too much water, you drown. Too little, you die of thirst. And most companies are just drowning in data. 99.9% of it is completely irrelevant. So if you just go around, clean it all up and then throw a bit of AI at it and predict the hell out of everything and our world will come out. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. You've got to start with what are the decisions you need to make in your business? What are the critical things, whether that's in defence or in business or in government? What tax rates we need to change? How do we solve climate crisis? Whatever it might be, you've got to start with the decisions, and then go and get the data that can help inform those decisions. Ignore the data that doesn't change your decision from A to B. Why go and get that data? Why spend the effort? Go and get the data that's going to change your decision from A to B. But then embrace the uncertainty in that there is no perfect. And again, COVID was a great example, and I don't think we've learned in government for the next pandemic we'll make the same mistakes because we haven't created in government a decision-making culture. And we spend a lot of time in the MOD trying to drive this message is you've got to focus on the decision, not on the data. And again, an example we use is when Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue at chess. You'll remember the scene.
Oh, yeah.
My, similar age to me, younger.
I used as a child, used to play on the Garry Kasparov chess machines. I knew the brand Kasparov when it happened.
And so now obviously chess computers beat every human just by a million mile, and things since AlphaGo and stuff, you've beaten it, more complex games. But what Kasparov did, he came up with a competition called Centaur. So it was a human-machine teaming chess competition. So you could turn up to the chess tournament with whatever computers you want, whatever hardware, and whatever people. But the teams that were most successful turned up with 4 or 5 laptops to get diversity of thinking, not just one AI model. They'd get a few. And diversity in thinking is really critical. So part of why our system's called collective, because it's the idea of collective intelligence. Not a single large language model in the cloud. It's about their diversity of thinking. But you'd also turn up with a grandmaster, or I'm not sure what the gender neutral term is. This, a grand chess champion, and the chess champion would be there to drive strategy and the decision making process, and the chess computers are there for the number crunching and would feed in information. And the ones who won would have that strategy. It wasn't just computers. They would have a human in the loop. But what's important is, at the point where the electricity goes, all those computers crash, you're still left with an amazing chess person. You're not left with me in my schoolboy chess. You're left with an expert in chess. So you've got someone who's absolutely brilliant at that decision-making process. So in defense, it's critical because of things like electronic warfare. Your data's been denied. You've got misinformation, disinformation. You need to upgrade decision makers so that if the data disappears, they can still make a smarter decision. And that, I think, is that cultural change across organizations. Why I think the danger with AI is if we take humans out of that decision-making loop, we're at massive, massive risk. I mean, my old boss, incredibly successful guy, I once said to him many, many years ago, he's worth, hundreds of millions, and stream of success after success. I said, Clive, you must be amazing at decision-making because you've got all these string of, constant successes. And he said, no. Did I get about half my decisions right? And I went, Clive, can't be right. You've got success after success. And he goes, no. He goes, well, when I'm feeling good about myself, sometimes I think I get 60% right. I said, but that doesn't compute. He said, well, look, he goes, I think before I go into any decision, that half of the decisions I'm going to make are going to be wrong. So I'm already planning how to unwind them. And I unwind them quick. And I go in and at the end of each month, I've unwound already the bad decisions. And I've doubled down on the good decisions. And that compounds over time. It says, so you've got to go in with humility, understanding that there's so much uncertainty in the world, your decision, half the chance it's going to be wrong. And if you go with that mentality, you can, and just double down on the good decisions. Don't throw people under a bus if they had a bad outcome, even if the decision was the right one. You change the whole dynamic of how you do things. And that always stuck with me. And a lot of our decision intelligence AI that we've built has that kind of embraces that core concept that AI is not there to remove uncertainty. It's there to help you to understand, to embrace that uncertainty and understand, should you go choose path A or path B, not based on which is the most likely, but which is the easiest to pivot afterwards if a decision's made. So Jeff Bezos at AWS would call it the difference between one-way thinking and two-way. So if a decision you can't unwind, like to sell a business, you put a bit more thought into it. But if it's a two-way, you can unwind it, move fast. And I think that kind of culture is critical. And AI can be a huge enabler to that. It can really support decision makers to, because it can crunch the numbers. It can deal with the complexity of data, the uncertainty in data, the probabilistic nature of the world, and give natural language feedback back to the user. So a lot of what we're doing is embracing that in our technology and supporting decision makers. But then if the data's not there, for whatever reason, it just doesn't exist, or you don't have access to it, or there's electronic warfare, misinformation, disinformation, so on, you still have a better decision maker at the end of it.
Where will the future chess grandmasters or grand players come from as we're increasingly leaning and relying on AI today? do you think we'll lose the ability to create pinnacle human beings?
So I think there's two schools of thought, I think, on this. Is AI making us dumber? Is it removing critical reasoning and critical thought and analytical thought? I think there is a risk with that people just rather than get the old encyclopedia and do research and look at stuff, people then move to just go to Wikipedia and get it instantly. Now it's actually you don't even have to go through the different articles. You just say what you want and you get AI will just produce your summary. You could say it could make us dumber, but the other side of it could say, well, it could also make us smarter because it can. And I do this with some of the mathematical reasoning stuff I have to do, where I have a conversation with AI where I'll brainstorm and red team an idea, and because AI has access to so much information, it can accelerate my thinking a lot faster. Now, it may close down some of the avenues that I would have gone to, but that's you counterfactual, you don't know. But I think the speed I can get to a conclusion about something grows. It adds. I still have that. Still have to make things work at the end of it. So I'm still accountable. But what it does, it can open up your mind and your thinking. People say AI can't be creative. It can absolutely help the creative process. So I think it's. But I think that comes down to the education process. I think that comes down to helping people to understand how to use AI, how to engage with it, how to have conversations with it. And I don't think people really understand that. I mean, I'm trying to teach my kids who are like 6 and 8, especially my 8-year-old who's very good on maths and stuff, to think about how to ask the right questions. And a lot of this is about asking the right questions, about querying. And if AI comes back, it's designed to be helpful. So it comes back going, oh yeah, you could do this. You've got to go back. Well, what are the downsides? If you don't ask what the downsides is. Oh, I did this with some research recently around some mathematical problem. It comes, you should do this, this, and this because it works really well in this probabilistic space. And I went, okay, but what are all the downsides? And then you want downsides? Oh, I'll give you loads of downsides now. And then you realise it's not appropriate that technology, that technique, because of the downsides. But you have to train people to go through those processes. How to engage with AI is really, really important. And we need to do that all the way through everybody. Like we had to teach people to go onto the internet and to do Google search and to how to stay safe online. We have to teach people to do that. We have to be doing it at the school level. At education level, AI has a massive potential because it can teach people with analogies that they understand. So my nephew, his mum is teaching him how to improve his maths. He's 8 years old. How to improve his maths using analogies around Manchester United. So it's typically around how United are losing at the moment, because I'm a United fan, which is a different story and how we've bought really badly over the years. But having that coming back to hyper-personalisation, helping people to understand a question or an idea through things that they're excited about, it's incredibly powerful. So I think we're not even scratching the surface of AI's potential right now. But what gets in the press is all the negative stuff. And I think that's what we've got to be really careful about is, the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads in the newspapers. There's a danger that, I know I saw this back last year when, very sadly, a AI robot killed a worker in a warehouse in South Korea. Very sad for the family and everything. But straight away it was like, oh, it's dangerous, stop it. But the number of workers killed in warehouses around the globe, thousands every year, from shelves falling. But no one says, but let's ban shelves. We've got to be really careful that all the potential, we don't throw it out, because the press like bad stories. Bad stories lead. It generates social media followings. People will engage with things that are negative stories. That's the way the world works. So there is an onus on us to not throw it away, but also on the counter, be aware of the threats of AI as well. And obviously in defence and national security, we're very aware there's huge threats as well. So yeah, it's a fascinating time at the moment.
One thing that has been resounding to me in this conversation is the ability to focus on the human decision.
Absolutely.
And I have found that decision making is easier when you have advisors who are confident, whether they're human or machine, and AI certainly can give its answers in a very confident way. But as you've said, if you're not asking the right questions and you're not questioning the answers, you can find very quickly that what it originally deployed in a very confident way isn't so deterministically correct.
Yes.
And whilst when producing a piece of marketing content and you choose the wrong colour based on your target demographic, that's an unwindable, that's a windable, you can unwind that decision. In the context of a healthcare diagnosis or a battle space, they are not decisions that can be unwound so easily. So whilst we're starting to leverage AI as a shared accountability on human decision making, there seems to be areas that are unwindable are really good areas to use it right now. Maybe in decision making that where those decisions aren't unwindable, maybe it's we need to pause for thought, retain human in the loop, these sort of things.
I think you always have to have a human in the loop aspect to this, and not from a I'm not thinking of this from an ethical point of view. I think from a point of view, I think it's better human in the loop. Going back to the centaur, the chess example, I think we are very good at, we're very good at the kind of reasoning strategy and thinking, being involved in that process. I think what we're terrible at typically is the quantitative side. We're terrible at understanding decisions and risks and stuff. We're not built, for things like thinking about things, temporal aspects. Like going back to the Klarna example, if I buy it now, I want it now, but in actually 3 months you're going to be worse off, and there's all these other things you can't buy if you don't wait. We're terrible at those things. So that's where AI can really, really help us make better decisions across. Life is about making decisions, and generally most people make poor decisions a lot of the time and compound them. And AI can be that.
Well, even the most successful are making 40 to 50% bad decisions, but they're aware of them and make them, recoverable.
And you separate the decision from the outcome. So going back to COVID, where there was just no understanding that some decisions that were done during the pandemic were terrible decisions that had good outcomes, just because it was such a stochastic or probabilistic event. And also some really good decisions that had bad outcomes, and people got roasted for them. And there's no nuance around that anymore. We've lost nuance in the world at the moment. But what AI can do is create that understanding that actually there's a separation between the decision and the outcome, and provide the audit trail to say, well, actually, yes, it had the wrong outcome, but that was only 40% likely, that outcome. It was the right decision at the time, because the more likely decision was, the best decision was this. But it's like if you were given £10 to bet on the Grand National, no odds. It's just £10. You'll win £20 back if you get it. All the horses have the same odds. The rational decision would to pick the favourite. That's the logical decision to do. Now the chances of that horse winning, because of big field and everything else, is quite low. But the rational decision is to pick the best horse, because there's no odds. You're not incentivized to pick the 50 to 1 now. But we lose that nuance. People don't understand, a lot of that complexity, because we're not designed. No one's, even if you're a mathematician, the level of complexity of the world, you can't keep that level in your head. It's just impossible. So I think, AI can be that guide and that helper, but you have to have humans as part of that process, because I think we make it better. And ultimately, it's our world. It's not AI's world. We've got to live with that. You've got to add that extra human, qualitative or ethical part to it. And I think it's really important, but I think it can accelerate our humanity. I mean, we've got a demographic crisis in the UK where we don't have enough people to look after the aging population and the unwell. AI can free us up to do the most important bit of, which is being human. Going to care homes, helping people is far more important than you filling out another report that AI can do really, really well. So, it's a great enabler, to deal with things like the real proper challenges in life, like loneliness, but, if we embrace it right, but it has to be, to my mind, it has to be human in the loop. So if one of the things we say is, and if you write a report, say a mergers and acquisition report, as a board of directors, you're still responsible for that acquisition. But what most will do is they'll outsource a part of the accountability, not to AI at the moment, they'll outsource it to one of the big consulting firms. They'll get Deloitte or Accenture or McKinsey or someone to write a big, long 600-page report. And they'll read, the C-suite will typically read the 2-page executive summary, that says, yes, you should buy it and buy it for, $3 billion. But they trust that McKinsey or Deloitte, whoever else, has done the other 598 pages, that they've gone through a process, that they've trained the people, it's been red teamed in QA and everything else, and that they're aligned because their brand is important, that they're partners in those businesses, they've got skin in the game, and also ultimately they've got an insurance, professional indemnity cover, and ultimately if they make a wrong mistake, then the C-suite person isn't going to get blamed, Accenture will get sued or whatever. AI can do that, but it has to take the same approach, which is you're still accountable, but you've got the 600-page of evidence and trust, and even you've got insurance in there as well. But what AI can do though is take you beyond that first 2-page executive summary. Is don't just stick with the 2-page executive summary. That 600-page document that no one's going to read, a few 100 trees will be destroyed when it's printed off and circulated in the board. You can explore the data, you can explore the conclusions. Okay, well, you're saying we should go ahead with this purchase. All right, I want to, almost like Minority Report, I want to see where are the risks. Oh, you can explore the risk. Okay, all right, now I have an accelerated exchange risk. Okay, let's explore that. Okay, what are the mitigations that AI suggests? Oh, maybe we should increase our hedging strategy. Or maybe there's another business over here that we could pivot this contract or whatever it might be. I think given that ability to explore the data and explore the conclusions opens up huge, huge potential. So I think it can create much better thinking and more better analysis, because people will move away from, oh, well, Deloitte did the report, so I'm going to just trust them because I'll sue them if there's rubbish, or it's not going to be my fault. Deloitte will be blamed.
Talking through is this deep sense of orientation around the decision rather than the data.
Yes,
but if one thing I've found is how using AI, it helps people make decisions because it's almost like a shared accountability.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think if you think about AI as that, as a productivity tool, essentially that's what it's doing. It's about productivity, and it's getting better at creativity as well. But I think where I think the analogy I would use, which I think works much better than the internet when that came out, the .com days and so on, is back in the 1970s when the first spreadsheet came out, VisiCalc. So before VisiCalc came out, accountants would have an actual spreadsheet, paper-based spreadsheet, and their clients would ask them to do some calculations, and they would write them in hand. And if they said, well, what's the impact if my sales went up by 5%? They would go with a razor, rub out the old things, recalculate it all, and charge 3 hours work for changing that one number at the top, but they had to recalculate all the way down. And then VisiCalc came out. It's done by one guy. He happened to do it on the Apple Mac and an Apple device and an early Apple computer, and that was a first killer app. People going out buying a $2,000 computer to run a $20 VisiCalc application, and it was one of the reasons Apple became so successful, because he just happened to build it for Apple. They don't like to talk about that because it doesn't sound as sexy as some of the Apple stuff.
The design,
but the accountants who were getting paid by the hour with a pencil and an eraser were terrified, because here was a productivity tool that was going to just automate completely what they were doing. And there was all this talk, it's going to make all these accountants redundant and everything else. 20 years later in the US, there was more accountants, not less. And what changed was, yes, the younger people who didn't have clients at that time embraced it and started to win work, because suddenly their clients were saying, well, you're only going to bill me 1 minute for that change. But in the end, what they were doing is the clients were still billing 3 hours, because what the client did was they'd ask more questions. And that was really important. Rather than say, well, they knew because it was going to cost them for 3 hours work to ask what's the impact if my sales go by 5%. Now they say, well, what if it goes from 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, and so on? They would ask more questions. And I think that as a kind of a blueprint for how AI can help us is it means we can ask more questions. And I think people miss that sometimes. So when you're coding, we would, in the old days, we would look at, if we were thinking about using a new software package, we might look at, do a quick search, what's available? Okay, there's 10 different open source packages to do it. And you'd do a bit of research, you narrow it down to one, and eventually you'd implement that. And it would take you time. Now you can go use something like Cursor and implement all 10 at the same time. And pick the one that is actually, from the metrics that you've got for the application you need it, actually works best for you. So you still spend the same amount of time doing what you were going to do, but you've now done it even better and faster. So as a productivity tool, I think AI, I think we forget that it's not just automating what we do now, it's actually making it, means we can ask more questions, we can test more things, we can move faster. So I think, I would use Excel almost as the only productivity tool most people have in their day-to-day jobs. People don't, apart from the internet, Google, Excel is the next most important thing.
I just want to question that before we get into final phase, is that there's just a slight difference because, and I'm deliberately going to bring this up to provoke you because you clearly don't like this idea of democratization. And the example you've used relies upon the avatar that is the accountant. Mm-hmm. And what your example there suggests is there's always got to be some form of human gateway to the financial insights from your data. And my response to that would be, is that does generative AI not give the actual person direct access into those insights? Why do they need that like with the spreadsheet, with the the horse-drawn carriage to the motor? I know that you don't like democratization, and I should give you an opportunity to explain that a little bit. But are we not with generative AI giving everybody access to super intelligence? And therefore, the question isn't whether an accountant's going to have a new AI tool to be able to ask more questions. But the question really is that everybody's going to, how does humanity sit alongside a super intelligence that everyone has direct and personal and trusted access to?
So I think, democratization, I like the concept of it, and, Web3, Web4, very much, we're very much part of that. But I think it's just as a word, it just sounds a bit rubbish. That's my issue with it. But I think,
especially with the Z.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think yes, there's a. Do you need with AI? Do you need to talk to the accountant to input it into AI? No, you don't.
The doctor, the accountant, the marketing person, the website SEO person. What those gateway roles, they're not going to exist anymore if you have universal access to a trusted super intelligence that give you the insight that you would pay that person to give you.
No, but then if you take the Excel analogy, is that the person who they might have gone to an accountant to create the spreadsheet, and then a lot of the questions that they want to ask that spreadsheet, they'll just change a value themselves. Or if when I used to build them, I'd put sliders in, a nice UX and user experience so people can just run it themselves. I wasn't trying to get time and materials. To me, it was always about what's good for the customer. In that situation, I think I'm still part of that process, but you're giving more and more autonomy to the individual. So I think I'm not trying to create a role for accountants, but I think there's still value of sat down with a customer in both of you. You myself, say with my background, sitting with a customer and using AI together to really explore their data. I still think there's a role there. We'll just do it so much quicker, and we'll explore deeper and richer and have a much better experience. But it does open up. I mean, you take the healthcare, take doctors. Things like Google are doing now around with Gemini. It's demonstrating that it's better at diagnosing than many doctors. And the reason it's better at diagnosing is less biased. Even though there's so much in the press about bias in AI models, but when you come in and it's not judging you. Humans, we judge. We're pattern matchers. That's hard written into our DNA. That's not, we're all judgmental completely. That's what we do. That's part of how we survived, was looking at patterns. AI, can be trained not to do that. So when you go in complaining about something, it doesn't go, well, right, Ian, well, you cycle a lot and this. Oh, it's probably not that. It looks at your symptoms and doesn't judge and go, well, you're a healthy man in his late 40s or whatever, or mid 40s. He doesn't do that. I was going to say younger, but that would just be obvious. I was trying to flatter you.
I'll fix it all in the edit. I'll come across it.
Yeah. So there is, AI could be fantastic, but then having a point where you might have to go and have cancer treatment or be taught through that process, having the actual oncologist there with you, that's you bringing back that humanity to it. So rather than they've got to get through it in 8 minutes because they've got the next person on the ticket, it's actually you sit down with you for 2 hours and it properly explain it and have that human engagement. So I think as a productivity, it's not going to get rid of oncologists. Well, what it can do is mean they have deeper, richer experiences with the people who need it. If your tests were fine, you don't need to go and have a 20-minute conversation. Oh, it's all fine. It's like, yeah, just text you, it's fine. So I think the dynamics are going to change dramatically, but it means we can have richer engagements where they're needed. I think it is going to change a lot, absolutely. But I think we need to make sure we keep human in the loop and give richer engagement to the people who really need it. And that's where democratization, I do think, is really powerful, because this technology is not going to make Elon Musk's life any better. He has minions to run around doing what he needs to do. If he needs to book a flight, it's sorted for him. He doesn't need to do that. I have a nut allergy. I don't need if I was as rich as Elon Musk, I'd probably have people just reading every label to make sure I'm not at risk. AI could do that for me. I spend a lot of time at the supermarket just reading labels. So I think people think I'm counting calories or something. I'm not. I'm just checking what all the ingredients are. AI.
Well, I'm starting to stress out about that coffee that you had there.
Yeah, the walnut syrup thing was probably not a good idea. The AI has the potential, if it's implemented well, and with humanity as a core part of it, to help the people who need it the most, whether it's they're struggling in education, they're struggling with social services, they're struggling with, all the way through their lives, struggling with their decision-making and financial advice and so on. Those are the people who can have a huge impact if we implement it in the right way.
Human-orientated AI and AI for the good of everybody are certainly my key learnings from all of the conversations I'm having. So as someone who has a deep experience, and I would say respect for the human condition, the mentors you talk about are people, you talk about, you orientate your stories around the people that you've met and that have guided you. There's a sense that you're, I believe, looking to preserve human relationships and human communities, which I think has to be a good thing. But also that AI is inevitably, in some ways, a digital version of humanity in the way we interact with it. We begin to trust it, especially as generational shifts occur, and people leverage tools in different ways. Even Sam Altman says you look at a 50-year-old professional versus an 18-year-old student, the way they fundamentally emotionally connect with these systems is very different. So we're seeing a different wave of human connection occurring. But as a pragmatic, experienced business leader who's very much at the frontier of the application of this in really important things, Ministry of Defence, healthcare, do you believe AI will take us to a utopia or dystopia?
I think in many ways it's something you just said then. It's going to potentially amplify humanity, good and bad. So it can massively improve the lives of the people who need it the most. being able to put disconnected AI, a doctor on disconnected AI and push it out across Africa and places that don't have doctors and don't have knowledge, hugely beneficial. So we can scale humanity, and in we don't necessarily need more tables and chairs and cars and things. What we need is knowledge and decision making, advice and the human aspects that we can now scale. We can codify it, we can improve it, and we can scale it. So everybody can have that personalized, hyper-personalized experience. So huge benefits. I mean, benefits that we're only right now even just scratching the surface of completely. But the dark side is really bad. So back in 2023, we've been building out agentic AI, way before everybody else, and we were asked to go into number 10 prior to the Bletchley Park Summit and explain that what we were doing around it wasn't called agentic AI at the time, but what we were doing around, and we just called agents. What we were doing around agents could be used in a very negative way, and we said, well, yeah, but there's all these benefits, and we're like, no, we just want the downsides. So I said, because we were showing, we could do all these great things, and I said, look, okay, give us 24 hours, and we'll have a think and come back to you about how we could weaponize AI. That was the ask. Could you weaponize AI? And myself and my co-founder, we went away, and we were both techies. And next day, I rang up Andy, and he goes, "Did you sleep last night?" I said, "No." I said, "Did you?" "No." And it was terrifying because we understood what the potential of this was, and we've been asked to think of it from a dark side, and we hadn't at that point. To be honest, we'd only we've been thinking about all the things good things you could do. And it came back to a story a few years before with one of the companies we were doing some work with, where they were in a room. There was a computer geek, classic, stereotype, what you'd think, doesn't make eye contact, just ones and zeros. And there was a special forces operative, all alpha male, muscles and everything else, who trained people on hand-to-hand combat. And he said to this computer geek, he goes, "Yeah, I could probably, break both your legs and both your arms in about 3 seconds." And this developer just didn't look up, just carried on tapping away, and goes, "Yep, but I can make you look like a paedophile in 24 hours. And it was that moment when you're sort of like, yes, the power of technology to destroy people's lives. You'll recover from broken legs. 24 hours, you're known as a paedophile. You don't recover from that. And that was because we both, myself and Andy, knew that story. We looked at how it could be weaponized, and we then went in to number 10, demonstrated what we'd built, how it could be weaponized, and the words to say is terrifying. And that before the Bletchley Park Summit changed the whole emphasis of that, which was all around, well, AGI's years away, so we don't have to worry. And we show the idea of collective intelligence, distributed intelligence, lots of different agents collaboratively working together to overcome a bigger problem, like ants, collectively far more intelligent than an individual ant. But we showed how you could take tools used available on the dark web, and you could basically create a swarm of black hat hackers that could work for dollars, disconnected, running in a completely autonomous way that could destroy everyone's digital lives, make everyone look like paedophiles, destroy their credit ratings, make them all look like they're having affairs, and you could take down a whole society for that. And and what our pitch to government was, there's only two ways you can deal with that. One is you take us back to the 1970s digitally, not going to happen. Second thing is you start building the vaccine factories. You build the capabilities to deal with it. Now, they didn't. They spent $100 million on the AI Safety Institute because they focused on, we need to think about ethics and bias in large language models. Absolute nonsense. Now, recently they've just changed it to the AI Security Institute, but it's like they've lost nearly 2 years. Just, again, bad decisions of government. It was, we would say, look, this is an existential threat to the country. You don't know where the threat's going to come, how it's going to come. But we don't know when the next virus, the next COVID is going to happen. But you build the factories and the processes to deal with it where it happens. And the only way you can do that is through AI. Because it's going to be an AI attack. And the only way to fight AI is with other AI. And it was deeply, deeply disappointing that government, and this was the prior government, didn't understand that. Now we're still pushing that they need to massively improve the way we deal with this. Now the Strategic Defence Review came out tomorrow, and there's words about that, but there has to be a massive improvement in the way you engage, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get all the benefits of AI. We're only going to have the negatives. So we need to massively improve our protection from the downsides, and massively improve how we spread the benefits across the whole of society, because it is a massive prize.